The massive alien ship floated silently in the darkness of space, its crystalline hull reflecting the distant stars like a jewel. Inside the ship, Ambassador Zix-471 of the Ethereal Collective stood before a large viewing screen, watching the small blue planet below. Earth looked peaceful from this distance, its white clouds swirling over green and brown continents. "The humans are coming aboard now," his assistant chirped in the harmonic language of their people. The sound was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Zix-471 nodded, his crystal body shimmering with soft blue light. For 3 months they had watched this planet and its people. The Ethereals had studied human cities, their technology, and their daily lives. What they found surprised them? These humans were weak creatures with no natural weapons, no armor, no claws or fangs. They seemed to be one of the most defenseless species the Galactic Council had ever discovered. "Remember," Zix-471 told his team, "these beings are fragile. We must be careful not to frighten them. They do not understand how dangerous the galaxy can be." On the other side of the docking bay, Captain Jake Morrison stepped through the airlock with his small team. The former Marine had traded his combat uniform for a diplomatic suit, but his military bearing remained. Behind him walked Dr. Amy Patterson, a language expert with kind eyes and graying hair. Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez brought up the rear, his hand resting unconsciously near where his weapon would normally be. The inside of the alien ship took their breath away. The walls were made of the same crystal material as the hull, glowing with soft light that seemed to come from within. Strange. Plants grew in geometric patterns along the corridors, their leaves shimmering with colors that had no names in human language. "Welcome, humans," came a voice that sounded like music. Ambassador Zix-471 approached them, his tall form towering over the visitors. To the aliens, the humans looked incredibly small and delicate. Their skin was so thin it seemed like it might tear at any moment. They had no protective shells, no natural armor, no visible weapons of any kind. "Thank you for inviting us," Captain Morrison replied, his voice steady despite the strangeness of the situation. "We are honored to meet you." The Ethereals exchanged harmonic notes that sounded like gentle laughter. These humans were so polite, so careful. It confirmed what their observations had suggested. This was a species that had never known real conflict, never faced true danger. They were like children playing in a garden, unaware of the wolves that prowled beyond the fence. Dr. Patterson stepped forward with a small device in her hands. "This is a translation unit," she explained. "It should help us understand each other better." "How fascinating," ZYX-471 hummed. "Your technology is quite primitive, but it shows remarkable creativity. We have been studying your species for some time, and we are impressed by your artistic abilities and emotional depth." The ambassador led them through the ship's corridors, past rooms filled with impossible technologies and alien artwork. Other members of the ethereal crew watched the humans with curious eyes, their crystal bodies pulsing with soft colors. To them, the humans looked like exotic pets, interesting but clearly helpless. "Your ship is incredible," Dr. Patterson said, her eyes wide with wonder. "The crystal technology is unlike anything we've ever seen. It is grown, not built," Zix-471 explained proudly. "We cultivate our ships like gardens, shaping them with song and thought. But please, tell us about your world. We are eager to learn about your peaceful civilization." Captain Morrison raised an eyebrow at the word peaceful, but said nothing. Lieutenant Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably, his military instincts telling him something was wrong with the aliens' assumptions. They entered a large chamber that served as a meeting room. The walls were transparent, offering a stunning view of Earth hanging in the void. Soft music played from hidden speakers, and the air smelled of flowers that didn't exist on any human world. "Please sit," Zix-471 gestured to chairs that seemed to grow from the floor itself. "We have much to discuss. The Galactic Council has been watching your species with great interest. We believe you would benefit greatly from our protection." "Protection?" Captain Morrison asked, his voice carefully neutral. Oh yes, another ethereal chimed in, her voice like silver bells. The galaxy is full of dangerous species. Warrior races that live for battle, hive minds that consume entire planets, machines that view all organic life as inferior. Your people are clearly not equipped to handle such threats. The aliens looked at the humans with what could only be described as pity. These poor creatures had evolved on a world with no real predators, no serious conflicts. They had never learned to fight, because they had never needed to. Their soft bodies and gentle manner proved it. We have observed your cities, Zix 471 continued. So much art, so much music, so much cooperation. Your people work together to build beautiful things. You care for your young and your elderly. You even try to help other species on your planet. It is quite admirable, but also quite naive. Dr. Patterson smiled politely. We do value cooperation and creativity. But I wouldn't say we're naive about the dangers of the universe. The ethereals made their chiming laugh again. Of course not. You simply have no experience with real danger. Your world is so peaceful, so protected. You have no idea what it means to face a truly hostile force. Captain Morrison's jaw tightened slightly. Lieutenant Rodriguez's hand moved toward his belt again, finding nothing there. The young Marine was struggling to understand why these aliens seemed to view humans as helpless children. Perhaps, 6471 said gently, you could share some of your cultural achievements with us. We are particularly interested in your philosophy of peace. How did your species learn to live in such harmony? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The aliens waited expectantly, their crystal bodies glowing with curiosity. They were certain that humans have achieved peace through weakness, through an inability to fight rather than a choice not to fight. Captain Morrison looked at his team. Dr. Patterson nodded encouragingly. Lieutenant Rodriguez straightened his shoulders, ready to follow his captain's lead. We'd be happy to share our culture with you, Morrison said finally. But I think you might be surprised by what you learn about humanity. The ethereals hummed. With pleasure, already planning their report to the Galactic Council. These humans were exactly as they had expected, gentle, artistic, and completely unprepared for the realities of galactic life. They would need protection, guidance, and careful handling. None of them suspected that their first impressions might be dangerously wrong. The next morning, Dr. Amy Patterson stood in the alien ship's cultural exchange chamber, surrounded by floating screens that displayed images from Earth. She had spent hours selecting the best examples of human art, music, and literature. The ethereals gathered around her like excited children, their crystal bodies pulsing with soft colors of curiosity. This is one of our most famous paintings, she explained, showing them a reproduction of Starry Night. It was created by an artist named Vincent van Gogh. He painted it while he was in an asylum, struggling with mental illness. The aliens made gentle chiming sounds of sympathy. To them, this confirmed their beliefs about humans. Only a species that had never known real hardship could create such beauty from personal pain. Their own art was practical, grown from crystal, and shaped by necessity. Human art seemed to come from pure emotion. How touching, Ambassador Zix 471 hummed. Your people turn their suffering into something beautiful. This shows remarkable sensitivity. No warrior race could create such delicate work. Dr. Patterson moved to the next display, showing them Mozart's music. The aliens listened with growing amazement as the complex melodies filled the air. Their own music was simple harmonic patterns used for communication. Human music seemed to serve no practical purpose except to create joy. Your composers must have lived very peaceful lives to create such harmony, another ethereal observed. Only a species that knows no conflict could make sounds this pure. Captain Morrison, who had been watching silently from the corner, felt his jaw tighten. These aliens kept making the same mistake over and over. They saw human creativity and assumed it came from weakness rather than strength. Actually, Dr. Patterson said carefully, many of our greatest artists lived through terrible times. They created beauty despite suffering, not because they avoided it. The ethereals exchanged confused harmonic notes. They could not understand how suffering could create beauty. In their society, pain was something to be avoided. Problems were solved through technology and cooperation. The idea that hardship could make someone stronger was foreign to them. Perhaps, Zix 471 suggested gently, your species simply does not understand the difference between minor hardships and true danger. What you call suffering we might call minor inconveniences. Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had been standing at attention near the door, made a small sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. Captain Morrison gave him a sharp look, and the young Marine returned to silence. The cultural exchange continued for hours. The aliens were fascinated by human literature, especially the stories of heroes and adventure. They read passages from books about knights and dragons, explorers and distant lands, soldiers and battles. But they interpreted everything through their own understanding of human nature. These stories are so imaginative, one ethereal chirped. Your people have such wonderful fantasies. Dragons that breathe fire, warriors who fight with swords, great battles between good and evil. Such creative minds you have. These aren't all fantasy, Dr. Patterson tried to explain. Many of our stories are based on real events, real people who lived and fought and died. The aliens made their chiming laugh again. Oh, of course. We understand that your people like to pretend their games and stories are real. It makes them more exciting. But we have studied your species carefully. You have no natural weapons, no defensive capabilities. How could you possibly engage in real combat? Captain Morrison stepped forward. Dr. Patterson, perhaps we should show them some of our historical records. Historical records? Zix 471 asked, his crystal body brightening with interest. You mean the documentation of your peaceful development? We would be honored to learn how your species achieved such universal harmony. Dr. Patterson looked uncomfortable. She pulled up displays showing ancient human civilizations. The aliens gathered closer, expecting to see more examples of human gentleness and cooperation. Instead, they saw images of ancient armies, medieval castles, and battlefield maps. The ethereals made confused sounds as they tried to understand what they were seeing. This appears to be some kind of competitive sport, one alien suggested, looking at a picture of Roman gladiators. Very elaborate costumes and equipment for a game. These are not games, Captain Morrison said quietly. These are records of human warfare. The warfare translated poorly into the ethereal language. Their translation devices struggled to find an equivalent concept. The closest they could come was something like organized competition or ritualized disagreement. Warfare? Zix 471 asked, genuinely confused. You mean like the formal debates we have seen in your government? Buildings? Very passionate discussions about resource allocation? Lieutenant Rodriguez made another small sound. This time it was definitely not a cough. Captain Morrison's hand moved slightly. A gesture that would have been meaningless to the aliens but caused the young Marine to straighten up immediately. Not exactly, Dr. Patterson said carefully. Warfare is when different groups of humans fight each other using weapons and tactics to achieve their goals. The aliens' harmonic communication became more rapid and confused. They could not understand how the gentle, physically weak humans could engage in anything resembling real conflict. Their own species had evolved past physical confrontation millions of years ago. But surely you mean symbolic fighting? Another ethereal suggested. Like a dance or ceremony? Your bodies are so fragile, so unprotected. You have no claws, no natural armor, no venomous stings. How could you possibly hurt each other? Perhaps, Zix 471 said thoughtfully, this is another example of human imagination. You create elaborate stories about conflict because you have never experienced real danger. It is like children playing at being fierce predators. The patronizing tone was becoming harder to ignore. Captain Morrison felt his military training warring with his diplomatic orders. These aliens were not just misunderstanding humanity. They were dismissing human history and capability entirely. With respect, he said, his voice carefully controlled, I think you might be underestimating what humans are capable of. The ethereals made their gentle chiming laugh. Oh, we mean no disrespect. We find your species fascinating precisely because you are so different from the dangerous races we usually encounter. Your peaceful nature is refreshing. Peaceful nature? Lieutenant Rodriguez finally spoke up, his voice tight with suppressed frustration. Yes, Zix 471 said warmly. You have achieved something remarkable. A species that has never known real conflict, never developed the brutal instincts that plague so many others. You are proof that evolution can create gentleness instead of violence. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken tension. The aliens continued to study the historical displays, interpreting everything they saw through their lens of human weakness. They saw ancient weapons as crude tools, military formations as elaborate dances, and battle tactics as complex games. Captain Morrison made a decision that would change everything. Ambassador Zix 471, he said formally, would you be interested in learning more about this concept of warfare? I think there might be some things about human history that would surprise you. The alien's crystal body pulsed with eager light. Of course. We are always interested in learning more about human creativity and imagination. Morrison looked at his team. Dr. Patterson nodded slowly, understanding what needed to happen. Lieutenant Rodriguez stood straighter, ready for whatever came next. Very well, Morrison said, but I want you to understand something first. What we are about to discuss is not imagination or creativity. It is not a game or a dance or a story. It is reality. The alien settled in comfortably, expecting another charming display of human artistic expression. They had no idea that their entire understanding of humanity was about to be shattered. The dining hall of the ethereal ship was a marvel of crystal architecture. The walls curved upward like the inside of a giant flower, glowing with soft light that changed color with the aliens' moods. Strange fruits from a dozen worlds sat on tables that seemed to grow from the floor itself. The air smelled of exotic spices and ocean breezes. Captain Morrison sat across from Ambassador ZYX 471, trying to enjoy what was supposed to be a celebration of successful first contact. Dr. Patterson was deep in conversation with several ethereal scholars about human poetry. Lieutenant Rodriguez picked at his food, clearly uncomfortable with the formal dinner setting. The aliens were in excellent spirits. They had spent 3 days studying human culture and were convinced they understood everything about this new species. Their reports to the Galactic Council were already being prepared. Earth would be classified as a protected world, its inhabitants too gentle and naive to survive in the dangerous galaxy without help. Your people are remarkable, Zix 471 said, his crystal body pulsing with warm golden light. So creative, so emotional, so wonderfully innocent. You have achieved something we thought impossible. What's that? Captain Morrison asked, setting down his fork. You have evolved beyond violence, the ambassador explained. Most species in the galaxy are shaped by conflict. They develop weapons, armor, aggressive instincts. But humans took a different path. You chose art over war, cooperation over competition. It is beautiful, but it also makes you vulnerable. Other ethereals around the table chimed in agreement. They spoke of humans the way adults might discuss particularly clever children. There was affection in their voices, but also a sense of superiority that made Lieutenant Rodriguez's jaw clench. We have seen many species, one alien said, her voice like wind through crystal caves. The Valdorians of the 7th Sector wage constant war with plasma weapons that can melt through solid rock. The Hive Queens of Kepler 442b command armies of millions, consuming entire star systems. The mechanical constructs view all organic life as inefficient and seek to replace it with their own designs. Terrible creatures, another ethereal added. They know nothing but violence and destruction. That is why species like yours need protection. You cannot imagine what real warfare looks like. Dr. Patterson looked up from her conversation. We might have more experience with conflict than you think. The aliens made their chiming laughter. Oh, we know you have your small disagreements. We have observed your political debates, your sports competitions, your business negotiations. Very passionate, very emotional. But these are not real conflicts. They are more like elaborate rituals. Captain Morrison felt something cold settle in his stomach. These aliens were not just misunderstanding humanity. They were dismissing human history entirely. Every battle, every war, every soldier who had ever died was being reduced to a children's game in their eyes. You see, Zix 471 continued, warming to his favorite subject. Real warfare is not something your species could comprehend. When the Valdorians fight, they reduce entire planets to molten slag. When the Hive Queens clash, the very fabric of space trembles. When the constructs decide to expand their territory, they simply erase all organic life from entire sectors. And, you think humans couldn't understand this? Lieutenant Rodriguez asked, his voice carefully controlled. How could you? Another ethereal asked kindly. You have no natural weapons, no defensive capabilities. Your bodies are so fragile, so exposed. You have never faced real danger because you have never had to. Your world is peaceful, your nature is gentle. These are wonderful qualities, but they also make you helpless against true threats. The table fell silent. The aliens continued eating, unaware that they had just insulted the military history of an entire species. Captain Morrison stared at his plate, counting to 10 in his head. Dr. Patterson bit her lip, knowing what was coming. Lieutenant Rodriguez's hand moved to his knee, where his combat knife would normally rest. I have a question, Zix 471 said suddenly, his voice bright with curiosity. We have been studying your historical records, and we keep encountering a word that our translation systems cannot properly interpret. Perhaps you could help us understand it. What word? Captain Morrison asked, though he already knew. War, the ambassador said, pronouncing it carefully. We find it mentioned frequently in your documents, but we cannot determine what it means. Our computers suggest it refers to some kind of organized competition or ritualized disagreement, but that seems too simple. Could you explain this concept to us? The dining hall became very quiet. The only sounds were the soft humming of the ship's systems and the distant chiming of crystal plants growing in the walls. Every human at the table felt the weight of the moment. Dr. Patterson looked at Captain Morrison. Lieutenant Rodriguez straightened in his chair, suddenly alert. The ethereals watched with innocent curiosity, expecting another charming explanation of human culture. War, Captain Morrison said slowly, his voice heavy with meaning, is what happens when diplomacy fails and two or more groups decide their differences can only be resolved through organized violence. The aliens' harmonic communication created a confused buzzing sound. They looked at each other, their crystal bodies flickering with uncertain colors. The word violence had translated clearly, but they could not connect it to the gentle human sitting across from them. Violence? Zix 471 asked, tilting his head. You mean like the territorial disputes we have observed among your animal species? Lions fighting over hunting grounds, wolves protecting their packs? No, Morrison said firmly. I mean organized, planned, strategic violence between intelligent beings. Groups of humans working together to defeat other groups of humans through superior tactics, technology, and force. The buzzing grew louder. The aliens were becoming agitated, their communication systems overloading as they tried to process this information. How could the fragile, gentle humans engage in anything resembling real conflict? But surely you mean symbolic violence? Another ethereal suggested desperately. Like your sports where teams compete for victory? Very intense, very emotional, but not actually harmful? Lieutenant Rodriguez laughed, a sound completely without humor. No, sir, we mean actual violence. People killing other people, armies destroying other armies, nations conquering other nations. The aliens' bodies began to pulse with rapid, discordant colors. Their harmonic communication became chaotic, like an orchestra where every musician was playing a different song. They could not reconcile their image of gentle, helpless humans with the concept of organized violence. "This is impossible," Zix-471 said, his voice shaking with confusion. "Your species lacks any natural weapons. You have no claws, no fangs, no armor, no venomous stings. How could you possibly harm each other?" Captain Morrison looked at his team one more time. Dr. Patterson nodded slowly. Lieutenant Rodriguez cracked his knuckles. The moment of truth had arrived. "Would you like me to explain exactly what human warfare looks like?" Morrison asked, his voice deadly quiet. The aliens fell silent, their crystal bodies flickering with uncertain light. They had asked an innocent question about human culture, expecting another charming story about cooperation and creativity. Instead, they had opened a door to something they were completely unprepared to understand. "Yes," Zix-471 whispered, though his voice carried notes of fear. "Please explain war to us." Captain Morrison smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Where would you like me to begin?" Captain Morrison stood up from the dining table, his movement sharp and precise. The ethereals watched him with growing unease as he began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back in a way that spoke of military discipline. The crystal walls of the dining hall seemed to dim, responding to the changed mood. "You want to know about war?" Morrison said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made the aliens' harmonic communication flutter nervously. "Let me start at the beginning." He stopped pacing and faced the aliens directly. 10,000 years ago, humans lived in small tribes. We had no metal, no machines, no advanced technology. But we had something else. We had the ability to work together, to plan, to adapt, and we had the intelligence to turn anything around us into a weapon. The aliens' crystal bodies pulsed with confused colors. They could not understand how creatures without natural weapons could pose any threat to each other. "We took rocks and shaped them into spears," Morrison continued. "We bent wood into bows and made arrows that could kill from a distance. We learned to work together in groups, surrounding our enemies, cutting off their escape routes. We discovered that the human mind is the most dangerous weapon of all." Dr. Patterson pulled up a display showing ancient battlefields. The images were crude drawings and archaeological evidence, but they told a clear story. The ethereals stared at formations of human warriors, their confusion growing. "But these are just small groups," Zix-471 said weakly. "Surely these conflicts were minor affairs, solved quickly." "The Battle of Thermopylae," Morrison said, his voice taking on the rhythm of a military briefing. 300 Spartan warriors held off an army of hundreds of thousands. They knew they would die, but they chose their ground, used their shields as weapons, and fought until the last man fell. They turned a narrow mountain pass into a killing field. Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. The Romans built an empire that lasted 1,000 years through military conquest. They created weapons, tactics, and strategies that are still studied today. They built roads to move their armies faster, walls to protect their borders, and siege engines to break enemy cities. The aliens' harmonic communication became more frantic. These gentle creatures were describing organized slaughter as if it were normal, even admirable. "You are exaggerating," another ethereal said desperately. "Surely these are just stories, myths to make your ancestors seem more impressive than they were." Dr. Patterson shook her head. "The Crusades lasted for centuries. Millions of people died fighting for control of holy sites. The Mongol conquest created the largest land empire in human history. Genghis Khan's armies killed so many people that forests grew back over abandoned cities." Morrison nodded grimly. "But that was just the beginning. Humans learned to make gunpowder, to forge steel, to build cannons that could destroy castle walls. We created armies of thousands, then hundreds of thousands, all working together with deadly precision." The displays showed medieval battles, siege warfare, the rise of gunpowder weapons. The aliens watched in growing horror as they realized the scale of human conflict. "The 100 Years' War," Morrison continued relentlessly. "The 30 Years' War, the Napoleonic Wars, each conflict bigger than the last. each one teaching us new ways to kill more efficiently. We learned to coordinate cavalry charges, infantry formations, and artillery bombardments. We turned warfare into a science. "Stop," Zix 471 whispered, his crystal body flickering with distressed colors. "This cannot be real. Your species is too gentle, too peaceful." "The American Civil War," Lieutenant Rodriguez said, his voice hard. "Brother fought against brother. 600,000 dead in 4 years. We invented rifled barrels that could kill accurately at long range. We built ironclad warships that could destroy wooden fleets. We learned to use railroads to move armies across continents. The aliens' communication systems were overloading. They made sounds like breaking glass, like wind through shattered crystal. Their perfect image of gentle humanity was cracking apart. "The Industrial Revolution changed everything," Morrison said, his voice growing darker. "Suddenly we could mass produce weapons, feed massive armies, move millions of soldiers across oceans. World War I killed 17 million people in 4 years. We used poison gas, machine guns, and artillery barrages that could be heard from 100 miles away." Dr. Patterson brought up images of trench warfare, of no man's land, of battles that lasted for months over a few hundred yards of ground. The aliens stared in disbelief at the systematic destruction. "World War II was worse," Morrison continued. 60 million dead. We learned to coordinate air, land, and sea forces. We built tanks that could crush buildings, bombers that could destroy entire cities, submarines that could sink ships without warning. We fought in deserts, jungles, frozen wastelands, and burning cities. The aliens were making sounds of pure distress now, their harmonic communication completely broken. They huddled together, their crystal bodies dim with shock. "You developed aerial combat?" One ethereal managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. "We learned to fight in 3 dimensions," Lieutenant Rodriguez said grimly. "Fighters, bombers, air-to-air missiles, surface-to-air defenses. We turned the sky into a battlefield. We learned to drop soldiers behind enemy lines, to strike targets thousands of miles away, to coordinate attacks across multiple continents simultaneously." "Modern warfare," Morrison said, his voice now cold and professional, "involves satellite surveillance, guided missiles, electronic warfare, and psychological operations. We can strike anywhere on the planet within hours. We have weapons that can destroy entire cities, armies that can move faster than the speed of sound, and tactics that can defeat enemies who never see us coming." The dining hall was completely silent except for the aliens' distressed harmonic whimpering. Their perfect crystal bodies were flickering with chaotic colors, their communication systems overloaded by the revelation. "But the most terrifying thing about human warfare," Morrison said quietly, "is not our weapons or our tactics. It's our ability to learn, to adapt, to turn every defeat into a lesson for the next victory. We study our enemies, we anticipate their moves, we prepare for battles that might never come. We have generals who spend their entire lives thinking about how to destroy other human beings, and we call them heroes." Dr. Patterson looked at the broken aliens with something approaching pity. "Every human child learns about these conflicts. In school, we study the strategies, memorize the dates, honor the dead. This is not imagination or creativity. This is our history." Zix 471 finally found his voice, though it shook with fear. "If your species is capable of such destruction, why haven't you conquered the galaxy? Why are you waging war against us right now?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. The aliens waited for an answer, their crystal bodies trembling with terror and confusion. Captain Morrison smiled. But this time there was something different in his expression. Something that might have been respect, or perhaps hope. "Because," he said quietly, "we learned something that apparently many species never do." The aliens leaned forward, desperate to understand. "We learned when to stop." The silence in the dining hall stretched like a wire about to snap. The ethereals sat frozen, their crystal bodies flickering with dim, confused colors. Their perfect understanding of the universe had been shattered in the space of an hour. These gentle, fragile humans were not the helpless children they had believed them to be. We learned when to stop, Captain Morrison repeated, his words echoing in the crystalline chamber. That might be the most important lesson humanity has ever learned. Ambassador Zix 471 struggled to form words, his harmonic voice broken and uncertain, but if you possess such terrible capabilities, such weapons of destruction, why do you not use them? Why do you not conquer other worlds, other species? Morrison looked at his team. Dr. Patterson nodded encouragingly. Lieutenant Rodriguez stood straighter, understanding that this moment would define how the galaxy viewed humanity for generations to come, because, Morrison said slowly, we discovered something about ourselves. The strongest warriors are often the ones who choose not to fight. The most dangerous species are those who have learned to be peaceful by choice, not by nature. The aliens' communication systems buzzed with confusion. They could not understand this concept. In their experience, species were either weak or strong, peaceful or violent. The idea that strength could choose to be gentle was foreign to them. We fought so many wars, Dr. Patterson said softly, that we learned what war really costs. Not just in lives lost, but in the damage it does to the soul. We learned that victory in battle is often defeat in spirit. Your species has nuclear weapons, Morrison continued, his voice growing more serious. Bombs that can destroy entire cities, missiles that can end civilization itself. We built them, we tested them, and then we realized what we had done. We had created weapons that could kill our entire species. The ethereals made sounds of pure horror. Their own technology was designed to create, to build, to grow. The idea of weapons that could destroy everything was beyond their comprehension. The Cold War, Lieutenant Rodriguez said, his voice quiet but strong. Two great powers, each with enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world several times over. For decades, we stood on the edge of total destruction, but we chose to step back. We learned about mutually assured destruction, Morrison explained. If we used our ultimate weapons, everyone would die. So we chose not to use them. We chose to find other ways to solve our problems. We chose to talk instead of fight. Dr. Patterson pulled up images of peace treaties, diplomatic meetings, and international cooperation. We created organizations to prevent war. We built systems to solve conflicts without violence. We learned that our greatest strength was not our ability to destroy, but our ability to choose not to destroy. The aliens watched the displays with growing amazement. They saw humans working together, sharing resources, exploring space peacefully. But now they understood the truth behind it all. This was not the behavior of a weak species. This was the behavior of a species so strong that it had learned to control its own power. Your diplomacy, Zix 471 whispered, his voice filled with new understanding. It is not born from weakness. It is born from strength that has learned restraint. Exactly, Morrison said. We know what we are capable of. We know how to destroy, how to conquer, how to wage war across continents and star systems. But we also know that true strength comes from choosing when not to use that power. The aliens began to understand why their first impressions had been so wrong. They had looked at human bodies and seen weakness. They had looked at human art and seen gentleness. They had looked at human cooperation and seen naivety. But they had missed the most important truth of all. You are not peaceful because you cannot be dangerous, another ethereal said, his voice filled with dawning realization. You are peaceful because you choose to be dangerous only when necessary. That's right, Morrison confirmed. We learned to be warriors so we could choose to be peacemakers. We studied destruction so we could choose creation. We mastered the art of war so we could appreciate the value of peace. Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped forward. Every human soldier learns about honor, about protecting the innocent, about fighting only when there is no other choice. We do not fight because we enjoy it. We fight because sometimes someone must so that others can live in peace. The aliens' harmonic communication was slowly returning to normal, but the tones were different now. There was respect in their voices and perhaps a little fear. They were beginning to understand that they had not discovered a species that needed protection. They had discovered a species that could offer protection to others. The Galactic Council, Zix 471, said carefully, "We were going to recommend that Earth be placed under protective status. We believed you needed our help to survive in a dangerous galaxy." Morrison's smile was gentle but firm. "And we appreciate the concern. But humanity has been preparing for a dangerous galaxy for 10,000 years. We have learned to face threats, that you cannot imagine and overcome challenges that would destroy lesser species. But we would welcome the chance to join your council," Dr. Patterson added quickly. "Not as children seeking protection, but as equals seeking cooperation. We have much to learn from other species and perhaps something to offer in return." The aliens exchanged rapid harmonic communications. Their entire assessment of humanity would have to be reconsidered. Their reports to the Galactic Council would be very different from what they had planned. "What would you offer?" Zix 471 asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Protection," Morrison said simply. "There are dangerous species in the galaxy, correct? Species that know only violence and conquest? Perhaps they would benefit from meeting a species that knows violence even better, but chooses to use it only in defense of those who cannot defend themselves." The implications hung in the air like a promise and a warning. The aliens realized that they had not just discovered a new species, they had discovered a new kind of species. One that had mastered the art of war so completely that it had transcended the need for war. "We would be honored to have humanity join the Galactic Council," Zix 471 said formally. "As full members, with complete voting rights and representation," Morrison nodded graciously. "We accept your invitation. But I want you to understand something about humanity. We come in peace because we choose to come in peace. We offer friendship because we choose to offer friendship, but never mistake our civility for weakness. We are not harmless because we cannot be dangerous. We are harmless because we choose to be." The alien ambassador bowed his crystal head in respect. "We understand now, and we are honored to call humanity our allies." Lieutenant Rodriguez smiled for the first time since boarding the alien ship. Dr. Patterson felt tears in her eyes as she realized that humanity had just taken its first step into a larger galaxy. Captain Morrison looked out at the stars through the crystal walls and thought about the future. Humanity would face new challenges, new threats, new opportunities. But they would face them as they always had, with intelligence, courage, and the wisdom to know when to fight and when to make peace. The galaxy would never be the same. And neither would humanity. The long journey to the stars had finally begun.